Hello and welcome to the DH Effect, the Decided Heart Effect. I'm Hillary and I'm joined by my compassionate co-host, Sonia. Every week we bring you guests who exemplify having a decided heart in the hopes that we will inspire you to maybe pause, reflect, and in any given moment, choose to act and create change in a positive way in your life. Okay, so today we are joined by two, multi-talented, hilarious, and wise women who, by the way, happen to be mother and daughter. I know this duo from way back. At the time, Louise and I were actually on a podcast station together. And yeah, station back before Zoom and all of that. We each had our own podcast. And I think that, Natasha came into it like the whole 9 yards. But Natasha was a teen at the time who was looking to be this actress, and she has gone on to do some amazing things. Louise is super accomplished. She's an entrepreneur with her company, Signing Families. She's the producer of The Salon, which is this really cool, inclusive and innovative digital series. She's an author. She's a psychologist. She's a digital strategist, content creator, blah, blah, blah. I could keep going and on and on and on. I've only tip of the iceberg, but I think her favorite job, because she lights up whenever she talks about her adult children, is being mom. And that leads us to Natasha. We're going to be talking a lot about Miss Natasha today. She is the new head of production for Ethos Studios. She's an extremely talented actress and writer. You have to check out all her stuff out online. And she has a brand new book that we're going to be talking about today. And I have to say, Sonia and I love the title. We both have our hearts really, really into working with teens and families. And so here we go. Are you ready? Shit adults never taught us. It is about damn time somebody wrote that book, Natasha. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome back. I want to know who these people are.
It's so funny you're talking about that radio or the podcast, quote unquote podcast, because yeah, I did that when I was 18 or 19, maybe 17. And we called it a radio show at the time.
That's
it was
right.
I think it was syndicated. I think that's why, because it was syndicated in the Deep South or in Texas.
It was recorded. There was no Zoom then. There was barely Skype. And it was recorded in the same exact vein. And we called it radio. And now it's podcast. And people are like, podcasts are blowing up. And I'm like, we've been doing podcasts for decades, guys.
That's right. Remember the headphones and it was craziness.
Oh, yeah.
I used to do it from a closet because there was no video. So I would do it from the closet of my apartment in college.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. Oh my goodness.
Crazy times.
I know, right? So this is really a special moment in your life, Natasha and Mom, Louise. Decided Heart. We have many experiences, but there are some where it really makes an impact, where we settle with that experience. And then what's really important to Hillary and I is the effect, that we take action and saying, I need to do something about this. And Natasha, we're going to focus on your book, and we're going to probably have you back for future chapters and episodes with the other things that you've achieved. But together as mom and daughter, and maybe Natasha, I'll start with you. What was that moment or moments that made you shift and say, I have to take action. I have to write shit adults never taught us?
Well, it's all encompassing, really. So Shit Adults Never Taught Us is a book of 98 chapters, but they're super quick. I feel like I scare people when I say that. They are bite-sized, comedic, 2 or 3 pages, very quick chapters. And they're broken down into 4 sections: career and money, relationship, mind, and life. And essentially, that's 98 effective moments. That's 98 moments I had to take action in my life. And it's stuff I had to figure out along the way because it wasn't part of my curriculum. It wasn't part of my upbringing because technology decided to change so rapidly throughout my lifetime. There's no way anybody could have taught it to me. There's no way to catch up to that. So, for my mom's generation, you'd get into a job, you'd stay in that job every couple of years. They'd hand you buckets of money and they'd give you a 401k that was matching, and you could buy a house for way less than you could buy a house now. And marriages were simpler and having kids was simpler. And unfortunately, mental health was not really discussed. And now that it's coming to the forefront, I say a lot, like I took 12 years of PE where I just learned to run 12 years over and over and over again. And I get it. I know how to run. As an adult, I don't run as much as I handle anxiety or depression or any of the catastrophic overthinking side effects that come with just being a stressful adult. And I think there's a lot that we weren't taught and had to figure out on our own. And if you sit with it and you don't take action, your life just gets harder. It's crunchier. And so I wrote something that I felt just, let's smooth it out for people. Let's make things a little bit easier. And there's nothing about me that's special. I have no pedestal to stand on that projects or preaches me over anyone else. I don't know anything in a special way. I just want to help others. And I'm doing that through my own life lessons. And a lot of those lessons were failures. And most of those lessons are things I'm still learning.
Well, and that's what I love. This morning I was thinking, as you're getting ready, then you sort of have those moments where something dawns on you. And I was like, she's really good at the hums. And in my head, the hums are humility and humor. So, right? I was like, that was what was going through my head. And I was like, it's so fun. As you read it, there's so much humility. You show up and like, dude, why are we keeping this a secret? Like, what, like, can we just talk about this, please? And Louise, I have to like give that back to you as well and say that while, I mean, some of this you do just have to learn through wisdom and experience. You can't, until you do it, you don't have anything to contextualize. You can't put it into existence. But I have to say, and Natasha, feel free to jump into, but how, with the psychology background that you have as well, her very ability to process this and then put it out in such a vulnerable way, you must be beaming, but that probably took a lot of work on your part.
Well, she also has a dad. So I would say it was a collective effort. I don't want to take all the credit. Since Natasha was very, very young, she was always the creative one. I always said she's like the square peg in the round hole. I knew that she was different than a lot of other children, and I've worked with thousands, so I really have a good number of kids to refer to. But I also knew that she had an interest in writing. We gave her her first journal or diary when she was little, and we found it when we moved to California. And the first few pages are, when I grow up, I want to be a director. And it's like sounded out. She is 6 when she's writing this, maybe 7. 4. You were 4. Okay, 4.
My 4-year-old journal, the first page just says, "I love TV" over and over and over again.
Yeah. And she would chronicle things, and I don't think I'm outing anything, but she has some learning disabilities, and that she learned to rise above that by writing a lot of her work in script formation and in narrative. And so teachers were like, "What is this?" And I'm like, that's the way she uniquely learns. And I had already known that she was going to be unique in her own way. But the fact that she was teaching the teachers how to teach her was brilliant, brilliant. And to this day, I would just like to go back to some of those teachers and say, she wrote a book about things that we never taught her, and maybe you should read it. So,
but she wrote it in the same way.
Yes, exactly.
This really is, it's a journal. It's a memoir of my own experiences. And it's written that way because it has to be. Like, this book came about in a really organic way, in that I was talking to a lot of friends through all of the Zoom happy hours and things over quarantine that we had never talked about before. I had never really had the discussions with friends before of anxiety, depression, coping with these mechanisms, or having the courage to fall in love, or surviving a breakup when you can't go to a bar and drink or hang out with your girlfriends, or having savings, side hustles, taxes, investments, all these things that we never talked about before because we were in each other's lives and we had things going on. And then when the world stopped and we had nothing going on, these conversations went a level deeper. And it triggered my brain to figure out why we never talked about this before. And the simple answer is we stopped asking questions. My generation in particular was told, go Google it. Go Google it. Well, you don't know it, go Google it. And you can't Google what anxiety feels like. You can ask a friend. You can't Google how do you trust yourself? How do you find courage in yourself? How do you find validation in yourself and get comfortable in your own skin? You can't Google any of that. You have to talk to friends. And so I wrote it as a journal, talking to friends. And it's my own life experiences because that's the only way I know how to write.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, what this book does is that you are extending that conversation in your own words to hopefully millions and millions of young people trying to navigate. And in my experience, this is it. This is where it's like the masters of learners. This is, Louise and Hillary, this is where we grew up. There are masters of knowledge, and young people look up to these masters, which are called teachers and parents, and we learn from them. And, Natasha, you said in your acknowledgements, I'm going to read it really quick.
Yeah, please.
I like to dedicate this book to my parents. They taught me many of these topics growing up, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without them. I would also like to thank the internet and my personal life failures. They taught me the rest. Mm-hmm. And this is such a huge shift that parents and educators have to let go, because our mindset as parents, we feel like I grew up that I have this responsibility to know all, and I need to teach Natasha and my children all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the missing link, though, Natasha, is what you're bringing up is wait. Because of information technology, we have to engage in ourselves. Like, what are we learning on our own with this access to all this information at once? And let's have this conversation as we're navigating through the ugliness and perhaps the prettiness of it as well. This book, I just love it because it's so short, it aligns with how communication happens today. So I want to thank you for your wisdom and then actually teaching me some things in your book.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it's such an impossible task to be a parent, to be a teacher. Teachers probably would love to teach most of the stuff in this book, but they're given a test and a curriculum and school funding milestones that they have to hit. Yes. And that is what they have to teach to keep their job. So I do not blame them. I do not blame anyone for missing this information, because my parents, I had an incredible upbringing. Mm-hmm. I know that most people don't, or many people don't. I had an awesome upbringing. I had a fantastic school district. I had fantastic parents. I never worried about a lot of these things, but there's no way for anybody to teach all of this because they're teaching from what they know. My parents teach from what they know. They can't teach me app-based investing if they don't know app-based investing. And I was in
Louise.
That was your father's job.
Right? I was in a 9-year relationship that took up most of my 20s and then decided to leave that relationship. And neither of them had that experience where they can be like, this is what essentially divorce is like. And divorce at 28 in, this time frame of app-based dating and social media. And nobody is able to fill that in a way that you can fill it in for yourself. And so you have to go to the people in your life and you have to ask them what's personal to you. But speaking in terms of my particular upbringing and my parents, I had a fantastic upbringing. And so there's no blame that I put on them. And I wanted to make sure that came across. I did a podcast the other day where it's two sisters, and they were like, we talk about our upbringing all the time and we mention trauma, and we feel bad because our parents listen to this and we don't want our parents to think like they did a bad job. They did a great job raising us. And I'm like, everybody has trauma, and it doesn't necessarily mean it came from your parents. I got MySpace at like 14 and started comparing myself to every other girl on the internet. Like that's trauma. There's no way my parents could have protected me from that. There's no way they could have protected me from the conversations they had amongst themselves that I'm listening to in the other room, or the circumstances. I grew up in a recession. When I was in college, the recession hit, and then I had a pandemic 10 years-ish later. There's no protection from that, and all of that is trauma.
I was just going to interject. Is that okay?
Of course.
I always say that our children, Natasha and her brother, grew up in a traumatic way in that the world was kind of going crazy. You had 9/11, you had the wars that were going on in the Mideast.
DC sniper.
We lived in the Washington, D.C. area with the DC sniper. There was a lot of calamity, school shootings. And so it was really a very tense time to raise children, because it wasn't the childhood I remember where, don't come home till the streetlights go on. It wasn't where you have a relationship because you live near, literally within minutes, of cousins or your great grandparents or your grandparents. We didn't have that because of the nature of just how we chose to live and where we chose to live. So I think that their generation is really been exposed to far more stressors at a very early age than any adult probably that I know of. So especially if they were raised here in the United States. So so I just commend them for being able to survive mentally.
I had just read a statistic that 4 out of 5 adults who consider themselves millennials identify with having anxiety. And I thought that seemed really low, because I feel like 5 out of 5 adults, if you're on the internet, how do you not have anxiety? If you're dealing with financials in one of the hardest financial times, how do you not have anxiety? And I think a lot of people say that they don't have it because they don't know how it looks. Nobody taught them that anxiety can manifest in different ways. And so for me, it's physical, but for other people, it can be a downward spiral of a mentality, or projecting things onto other people, or lashing out. It can manifest in thousands of different ways in people. And we were never taught it, because we maybe got one semester when you're 13. And I don't know about you, but when I was 13, a lot of information that came at me didn't stick. So I had a lot going on, like hormones and stuff. I had a lot going on. So I would have loved to have that conversation every year if it was in school, or have the information more available to me. And I do appreciate that is more available now, but I don't think we're doing enough to help people understand this. And that's why I wrote the book. But I also think when we teach people stuff, we're teaching it in such a boring way. Like the whole career and money section, I was probably taught a lot of that and didn't listen. It's so boring. That's why I wrote it in funny, quick chapters. Is anybody can read 2 funny pages of something and take it away and just use it however they wish. But if you're taking a whole course, you have a whole self-help book on these chapters, it's not going to stick. It's too boring.
Well, and that's what's so cool about the way that you break this down is, first of all, just to give people like the career and money shit. Okay. Because each section is a different title, as you said earlier, but it's like, it's so practical, so you have the soft skills, as you would say, the social emotional part of it later, but it's also like, hey, taxes, resumes, negotiating, advocating for yourself, which is still something I try to get adults to do so much of the time. It's like, yes, you get to be a partner in your healthcare, deposit, like all of these things, even to the point of like accepting that you have to work for your dreams and it's not going to be handed to you, but you break it down with quotes that are sticky, along with checklists of like, okay, you read about it, now go ahead and do these things so that you can move forward, because that's part of the problem. And Louise, as a teacher, psychologist, all of this is going to, I think, resonate with you as well. The learning model, it's like you start out, you introduce the topic, but then that's all people have been doing, but you have to not just introduce the topic, but make it relevant, and then provide an opportunity to move to action, because unless you move to action, it isn't sticky. You don't actually learn it.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right. How many people read a self-help book and then put it down and go, fantastic, I'm done, I'm fully grown and baked. And then they don't do anything about it. And I made the checklist because that's how my brain works. I'm super ADD. And if I read a book and put it down, I will not come back to that if there is not actionable items in there for me to actually check off and cross off like on a to-do list. So I wrote the way I think. There's got to be somebody else out there that thinks like me.
All of the people.
I write checklists.
You know, the other thing that's so important though is even though that this book is so helpful, there is a detachment, and I think this is so important. And I'm gonna keep reading stuff that I read that's really hooked on to me. You know, in the beginning you said, hey, not every 98 things here is going to be relevant to you, so skip it. And then you said this: I am not your mother. I won't check up on you to make sure you did your homework. That is so profound to me, because so I work with teens and college age students. And for some, you know, I mean, for reasons we know of, we've held on too tightly and we've micromanaged way too long. And that our young adults have become codependent on the adults raising them. And so they're following an equation and they're looking for validation and worth from others. And so for you, Natasha, to bring that up, that you no longer, like, you don't need a mom. You need to be independent. I'm giving you tools and insight and reflection based on my life.
And permission.
And permission. I release you. Like, damn it, live your own life, right?
Yeah. If you want it to happen, you've got to do it. No one's going to do it for you. Someone might do it instead of you, but no one's going to do it for you. And if you're interested in making your dreams come true, nobody's going to walk up to you on the street and be like, here you go. Everything you wanted in a nice, neat little package. That never happens. So you've got to take the steps and actually make it happen for yourself. Also, the validation that you're talking about, like giving the gold star for everything, won't mean anything if you learn to validate yourself, because there's never going to be that job, that house, that person in your life that validates you. And you're like, cool, that was the missing piece. Now I'm totally complete. And as long as I've got that thing, I'm perfect. That never happens. You're the only one that can do that for yourself. So you're the only one that can read the book and put these things into effect.
I love that, because it's funny. It's almost, even though it's adult shit never taught us, or say that the right way. I'm sorry. Shit. Okay. Yes. You know what I'm trying to say, because
very close.
Thank you. I was like, my tongue was just shit adults never taught us. There we go. Every once in a while you have a moment. I had one. But what's interesting is my first initial thought was like, this is gonna be a blame game. This is gonna be a blame game. This is gonna be, and it's not. It's like, hey, it's okay, but like, let's figure this out together. And that's, Louise, I want to actually throw a question to you too, and maybe it's not a question so much as advice or some thoughts on one of the things that I know about you as a mom is anytime your kids have shown in the past even a glimmer of interest in something, you're like, oh, okay, how can we feed that a little bit more? And you did that really fearlessly, in my opinion. I mean, to the point of like, okay, you want to be an actress? Like, here we go. Like really, really leaning into it and never really saying, well, that's just not, you never let your own fears, and maybe you don't have your own fears, but I see parents all the time have their own fear for wanting to bubble wrap their child, is it keeps their child from becoming who they are meant to be. Can you talk to that a little bit? Like how do we do that?
Well, Natasha will know that I always say, do your passion. I think I've said that multiple times, where a lot of people get stuck in jobs, in majors in college, in marriages that are an oops. They shouldn't be there, you know? And so I wanted for our kids to do their passion. Life is only so long, and it's really unfortunate if you're doing a whole bunch of years in things you don't want to be part of. You know, maybe you went into a career and you decided after 5 years, I really don't like this, then switch it, pivot, you know, that big word, pivot. And it took the COVID pandemic for some people to get that wake up call. I think for me, it took having cancer to get that wake up call, you know, to say, okay, I've been doing X and I'm pretty happy, but I wouldn't mind pivoting a little bit, being more of an entrepreneur, testing those waters. And I hope that by example, that trickled down to our kids. And their father did the same thing. He switched careers, more than once. So do your passion, do what resonates with you at that time, but responsibly. Like, don't go like, oh, today I'm going to live on a yacht for the next 10 years. Maybe you should think it through. Read Natasha's first set of chapters about financial gain and, savings, and before you do that. But that's kind of, what I always adhere to as far as a teaching lesson, for the kids.
Yeah, I would say, just to add on to that, as being one of those kids, yes, she did do that. She would pivot us any way we wanted to go, but there was never the option of nothing. You couldn't pivot to nothing. So I tried dance, then I tried gymnastics, then I tried soccer, then I tried field hockey, then I tried volleyball, then I tried acting, and there were probably 10 other things in there. I think I went to basketball camp a couple times. Like, there was a lot of stuff in there. And then I would be like, I don't like this. And she would be like, okay, you can leave when you find something you like, and we'll switch to that. So I kept bouncing around things. I would do horseback riding lessons. And I would be like, I don't like horseback riding. And she would be like, okay, you can stop them, but what are you going to do instead? And I'd be like, field hockey. And then so I always was trying something. Nothing was never the other thing. It always had to be something. So just like switching jobs, you can be like, I don't like this career. Okay, what do you want to do? You can't just quit and be like, I'll figure it out, because statistically you won't. Statistically, you're going to sit around and wait for something to happen to you. Sure. You've got to set that into effect. You've got to figure out what it is that drives that passion.
I also was not the over-programming parent. And I think that's a point where there were a lot of friends that both my kids had, where Monday they did something, Tuesday they did something, Wednesday they did something, maybe Thursday they did 2 or 3 things. And these children were exhausted. I never wanted our kids to be exhausted, but I also didn't want them to be couch potatoes. So there had to be a happy medium. And I hopefully that we did reach that. So.
Yeah, we had 3 weeks of camp every summer out of 8 weeks that we had to pick a camp that we went to. It could be a day camp. It could be whatever kind of camp you wanted that was active or educational or something that fed your passion. So that was like half the summer, and then the other half of the summer you could lay by the pool. It's a balance. And that balance was taught to me really early on, so that now it's a balance in my own life.
And travel is important.
Yeah.
I mean, passion is such a faux pas word in college admissions where I come from, because, a lot of young people think that passion's a noun, like you find it and then you stop. I found it, like I go like aisle 6, there's my passion right here, right? And passion is on, you're nurturing, and passion changes, and it's flexible, and it grows, and there's layers, and there's shifts and turns. So it's a lifelong thing. So I know, vocabulary, it is a noun, but it's really a verb, right? And I love this parenting or this family dynamics where, again, like there's such a difference between the programming and parenting, and then teaching your children the world is out there, babe. I want you to have courage.
Exploration, right?
Yeah, you go out there, explore, and you know what? Your life is short. Don't settle for a thing that you are now unhappy with because you made the commitment and now you have to endure it in the name of achievement, right? So I'm celebrating that, and I'm hoping that many, many families are listening and perhaps maybe reflecting on their own family dynamics.
Without that, I don't think I ever would have written this book, because having the lessons from a childhood that says you can try anything, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You can shift back, or you can shift again to something else. So I wrote a book, and I went through the whole process of what if I don't like this, if at any point I don't like this, I can shift to something else. And I just kept going and going and going. But something about fuel your passion as a kid means when you feel a passion spark in you, you act on it as an adult. And that is that's how this book happened. That's what happened.
Well, in listening to everybody, to all 3 of you, the 2 things that come to my mind are, one is this idea, and Sonia and I talk about it a lot, curiosity. And Natasha, you said that from the very beginning. You said we weren't asking enough questions. And to me, I literally sat down with a kid the other day who my master's was from Cambridge. He wants to go there. And so he sat down and he had a conversation with me, and he's like, what's your advice? And I said, I have one thing I want to tell you, be curious. And it was funny because every time I talked to him, it was like, have you done this? And he's like, well, no. I'm like, well, why not? I like, ask the question, ask the next question. And the other part, and I hear that in everything that you're talking about, but then the other thing that I really is resonating with me, and I never thought about it until I listened to you, is Sonia, you have said that the number one predictor of success in college, and I think also out in the workplace, to be honest, I think it plays out, is a feeling of belonging. And so that idea of belonging can't come when you are forcing yourself to be that square peg in a round hole. And it's exploring and connecting and asking the questions is what allows you, that old childhood book, right? Are you my mother, right? Are you, it's that idea of like asking life, like, is this where I fit? Doesn't quite feel right. Is this, but advocating, and that doesn't mean you can't be happy in the moment. And you talk about that in the book too, like be happy in the now and keep asking questions and exploring.
Yeah, it's community, it's support. Belonging essentially is community and support. A couple of years ago, one of the most Googled questions is, what is love? And that's a prime example of the fact that we don't really have community and support anymore. That millions of people thought it was better to ask Google than to ask their friends or to ask their support system. And so you're saying that sense of belonging doesn't, it's requirement essentially to keep going and to feel like what you're doing is right. And that's never been more evident than it is today. We have the proof to say most people feel like they don't have the support around them to feel like they belong.
And that anchors to what you said in the relationship section of your book, because although that sense of belonging is really important, you said the most important relationship you have is you. That one I guarantee lasts a lifetime. And so the work that we do, our decided heart moments, we really have to own those. We have to settle with those and really figure out, wow, I'm feeling these things. Take care of that, because that's where the worth comes from, right? And so, because that sense of belonging can be misconstrued where we're like, oh, sense of belonging, I need to get validation here. My worth belongs in this community. And that's where it becomes awry and we get really, the anxiety builds. So if we could take care here with our own hearts, then we can engage in these communities where that support happens.
It's true. You're always going to be with yourself 24/7. You're the only thoughts you're ever going to hear. You're never going to hear anybody else's thoughts. They're the only thoughts you're going to hear. So take care of them and be kind to yourself. You would never treat somebody else the way you'd probably treat yourself in hard times. And if you can give the compassion to yourself that you give to other people, it's so much easier to get through life and to find that validation in yourself and to like yourself. I always tell people, like, it's not in the next thing. Getting that amazing job isn't going to make you feel the way you think it will. You can have $1 million, you'll adjust your life, and then you want 10, and then you want $100 million, and then you want $1 billion. And I bet if you went to Jeff Bezos right now and you're like, are you happy? He'd be like, like some days. And so it's not in the money. It's not in the partner. It's not in the house or anything, because you can be in a really amazing marriage and still feel lonely sometimes. It's got to be you. You've got to be comfortable in you.
Louise, I'm looking at your face right now, and I feel like you're beaming, and like I can see your heart about to explode. You know, I just want to make
smart kid,
right?
I want adult.
Yes, I mean, I want to hold space. I want to hold space for you too, not Natasha. Like everything that you are saying it is so wise. It is so wise beyond your years. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I mean, you are nearly 30 or 30, like right in
31.
31. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Time has gone so fast in my head. And I'm sure in Louise's head, Louise is like, no, you're not. You're like 4. You know, like in that, but
not quite.
No, I know. But Louise, as you're reading this book, you know, 2 questions. Number 1, just the wisdom and the pride that you must have felt. I would love to have you talk about that. But also, was there something that stuck out in the book to you where you were like, whoa?
Well, yes, pride, of course. You know, I'm proud of Natasha, if, you know, every day, and in the little things that occur in her life, as well as these monumental milestone moments. The book, she had us pre-read it, And I read it like this. I'll be honest, I skipped the money parts, the financial part, and went straight to relationships because I was most curious as to how we played out, how people in the world played out that we knew together. And so I went through that, and when I was done, I was like, okay, that was good. I could live with all that she said. So there weren't any like yikes moments. The mental health part, I've lived a lot of what she said with her, and some of it was a little bit of a surprise, maybe the intensity. But I think that the being able to tell her truth, telling your truth, Natasha, was very important, because we're afraid to tell our truth. My generation is sort of on the mental health issues because I'm older than you ladies, probably. My mother's and, my parents' generation is like, you deal with your problems behind closed doors at home. So every generation gets more open-minded when we talk about mental health. And so I know that some people have said, ooh, she outed a lot of information that shouldn't be, discussed. And I'm like, it's her truth. It's fine, because it's her book. She's an adult. She can write her truth. And my job is to read it and just support her. And that's what I'm doing.
For sure. One thing that
now she's beaming. Look.
I know. I love it. I'm watching her face.
She had to read the book. I had to give her a copy of it before, and she read like a very rough draft that was, I think, before the editor even saw it. But I put a lot of really personal stuff and personal stories in here. And I sent it to people that, without question, someone would know who it is. So you can say like, oh, I had a friend who did this, but you can't be like, I had a mom who did this. Like, people are going to know who that is. So I had to make sure that, of course, everything she's comfortable with. And she came back and she was like, yes, we're not perfect. Of course, there's going to be some stuff that is in here that's just honest, and it's my experience. So I'm just speaking to resonate with other people who have gone through something similar or are going through something similar. And so she allowed it all. Nothing was changed because of her. And honestly, everyone I sent it to was like, yeah, okay, if that's all true, so go ahead. And no one's going to change what happened. You can't change history.
For sure.
I love the part about when you tell the story about us doing a mental health day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really powerful lesson for parents to learn, perhaps, that their kids, you let them have sick days when they have temperature or whatever, but you don't let them have a mental health day. And maybe if we gave more mental health days, we'd have less bullying, we'd have less, kids breaking down or pretending that they're sick. As a psychologist, I see kids pretend they're sick all the time just because they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So I love that you added that part.
Yeah. I'm so resonating right now because again, I'm going to circle back as parents were so busy trying to figure out the next thing or the repairing or the fixing. It's so noisy in our heads. And when I say parents, educators, working with young people, that we're not really observing and listening to what it is that they need. And, what this exchange is that we're hearing right now is that, Louise is like, I'm learning from my child, my adult child. And I resonated that with my own daughter, who's 20, when I had this sex talk. And I thought I was the all-knowing. I'm the expert here. And she's like, I know all that, Mom. I know all that. And I'm like, so I stopped, because thank God I worked on listening just a bit. And so I asked, what is it? Tell me what you know. And guess what? She was teaching me stuff. She was teaching me stuff that's happening today that I didn't know was out there. And she became my teacher. And I think that's the release, that don't be so noisy and all-knowing. But there is this exchange with this generation who is finding so many things on the internet and with each other, that there's this learning and there's this growing together. And I just love this relationship between you two, and how you've really kind of formed this bond with an adult child.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she taught me from her toolbox of lessons, and then my toolbox expanded. So giving her some of that back. And it's just because we are different generations and we have different sources of income or sources of knowledge and
sources of income.
And sources of income.
I mean, yes.
But sources of knowledge. She's talking to her friends. She's talking to the people in her life that are filling her in on information, and the people in my life are filling me in on totally different stuff. And that's not something we have to keep secret. I can share that with her. And having that open communication is what allows for that.
That's what I was just going to say. I think that the big word that gets lost so often today, and I used it already, one of those hum words, the humility piece. And the humility comes from, I think fear and anxiety comes in all shapes and sizes and forms. And our generation, Louise, Sonia, was still kind of dealing with the anxiety of, oh my gosh, you have to look a certain way as a mom. Or a dad, as a parent, and you know how your kids behave and the success and whatever is a reflection of how well you've done this job, and you can't look weak to your kids. And I'm not saying everybody bought into that, but I see it so much, in the anxiety and the fear of trying to keep it all together and perfect, and then what that does to a child as well. And I love the detachment and the growth mindset of like, yeah, I mean, just to be blunt, like shit's going to happen. It's going to happen. And you know what? The only way we're going to learn is the experience. And maybe the trauma, we can never grow unless we're uncomfortable. If we're always comfortable, then we can't grow. Literally, that signals to us, oh, edge of growth. Here we go. Get ready. Let's celebrate it. And that's what I hear from both of you is not the anxiety of like, oh my God, there's something happening and I have to, but like, oh, oops, okay, there's going to be a failure there. What did I learn from that? How can I grow? How can we talk about that? And not that it's always that easy, but the acceptance and understanding that sometimes it's not going to be that easy.
I think when you parent, when raising kids, I just wanted very simple things. I wanted them to be healthy and breathe, because I had a son who didn't do that for a while. He had difficulties with his breathing consistently. So you get really down to the basics. You want a healthy baby, you want a healthy family. And then I want them to be educated. That's very important. Education was always first. And I want them to give back, to give more than they get. Everything else, doing what resonates with you, where your heart leads, passion, or whatever you want to call it, is just more gravy on top of all of that. But just the basics. And then after that, don't sweat the small stuff.
She let us learn however we needed to learn. So I was a kid, ironically, who hated reading. And I was never the person who was going to sit down and read a book cover to cover when I was younger. And essentially, that's why I wrote a book that is definitely not meant to be read cover to cover. But I would put the captions on TV. And so she would give me an hour in front of the TV and say, okay, you can watch TV if the captions are on. And that's still reading. And it still got me to pick up my speed and recognize words and sound out spelling and all of that without having to sit in a corner and pick up a book. So it's adapting. It's everything I think a parent is, not being a parent, but I assume parents are just constantly adapting. And there's no way to be perfect in that.
For sure. Well, I know that we have to come to a close soon. I want to highlight something about this book, because Natasha, this is not a touchy-feely book, although there is some touchy-feely parts in here. What I truly, truly appreciate, though, is the actionable tips and tricks that you provide. And I wanted to highlight two. Okay, first, I love the relationship. Fairy tales suck. I love it. I was like, there's a lie that's just been broken, right? But you, in this section, you say you have a section called Learn How to Fight. And then I'm like, I've never learned how to fight. I mean, this is something parents never discussed with me, but then you broke it down. The couple fight, the coworker fight, family fight, best friend fight. I so appreciated the small chunks and how uniquely different they are in terms of the dynamics. And the other highlight is anxiety. When I hit the anxiety chapter and you said calm anxiety, when you actually gave tricks of how to practice some of the things, and some things will work for me and other things tricks will work for others. I just felt like this book was more than just, let me share, some things that I know. You really have this actionable piece to this book. So for me, I'm already going to build my order for all the young people that I know. Like this is the book. This is the book that you have to start with. So just sharing some appreciation there.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, the learn to fight section was interesting because I felt like every memory I have of fighting, a adult told me not to. You hit a kid when you're 5 years old on the playground, they're like, don't hit. And then you yell at your brother, and my mom would be like, don't fight. Kids, stop fighting. And then you become an adult, and there's no adult being like, stop fighting. And you, like, if me and my boyfriend are at home and we're fighting, I'm in my head being like, don't fight, but we have to. Like, that's the only way to grow and to push past something. So have a productive fight. Learn to fight without screaming at each other across a room and then just storming off separately and nothing gets resolved. Learning how to fight in a productive way and then assuming that fights are going to happen, because coworkers spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week sitting next to each other. Fights are going to happen. Family is, you're with your family your whole life. Fights are going to happen. Like, and recognizing how to fight is far more important than just trying to avoid them. The anxiety chapter is about half a dozen coping techniques that I very clearly lay out that work for me. But like you said, at the very beginning of it, I go, these are some things that work for me. They don't work for me every time. They don't work for me in every scenario. Maybe they work for you, or maybe you do one and you're like, okay, I know how to level that up or make it work for me in a different way, like tweaking it a bit. And that's fully encouraged.
Natasha, I have to put an exclamation point on the fighting part of it. Sonia, I'm so glad that you brought it up too, because this is a huge, I feel like I need to have a soapbox constructed for me that I can get up on right now, because I have a huge passion for telling people you don't get to have a conflict-free life, and conflict is different than bullying. And there are so many people that confuse the two. If you're uncomfortable in a discussion, that does not mean that you're being bullied. That means there need to be some ground rules set up and some boundaries around the conflict and getting to a resolution. Now, there is bullying for sure, but sometimes because we haven't taken the responsibility over here, it turns into bullying. And so just saying to people, like, I want to go out to everyone going, hey, conflict is real and it's okay.
Yeah. There's a section in the book called, or a chapter in the book called What's Below That. And it's, if you're having the same fight with somebody over and over and over again, like if you're having a relationship fight that's, you never clean up, you never do the dishes, you don't bring in the trash cans, you didn't get me dinner the other night, like there's the same fight that just shows up in different ways. There's something below that. And what is below that? Is it, I feel like I'm putting more effort into this relationship, I feel like I care about you more, I feel whatever that is, that's the real fight. Have that one and discuss that, because you're just going to keep going in circles if you have the surface fights. And it's what you said, it's conflict. And people, if they don't take the responsibility, if they don't say, I need to resolve this general conflict, then it turns into, well, I'm being bullied, or they're projecting. So the tools that I use in that chapter are the same tools we used in first grade, the who, what, where, when, why. Like, who am I actually mad at? And why am I mad? And where in my body do I feel it? And when does this happen? Does it always happen at 7 p.m. on a Friday when I'm hungry and tired? Or like, all of that is a contributing factor into why you're fighting. And if you're able to solve those questions, you're probably going to have a far more productive fight, and you won't escalate it into the bullying section of that. It'll stay in the conflict.
Oh my gosh, Natasha and Louise, I feel like, quite frankly, each chapter we could have a discussion on. That would be a full podcast, don't you think?
98 of them.
Right, 98.
98 chapters.
98 podcasts and go. So Louise and Natasha, Louise, I'll let you go first. As we're kind of closing out, again, the discussion I feel like is so rich, and we could go. I thank you so much for being here. But can you let us know, let our audience know, Louise, if people want to check out the salon or anything else, how they can get a hold of you? And Natasha, of course, we want to know about how we can get this amazing book that we love and order it for all of the young people that we know. So Louise?
Well, the best way to figure out what I'm up to and all the various things is louisesattler.com, SATTLER.com. It's right there on my little Brady Bunch box. Or LinkedIn. those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. And there, you can also get my email and phone number off of some of those. So, or call Natasha, she'll tell you.
She'll tell you.
Yeah.
Natasha?
So Shit Adults Never Taught Us is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, and Google Play Books. You can find all the information at shitadultsnevertaughtus.com and on Instagram at shitadultsnevertaughtus.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like we're going to have you guys back on again. And then Luis, you have such an incredible story about finding families that we can explore a bit too. So just can't wait. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week for the DH Effect. We've explored, well, maybe a quarter of the 98 different decided heart moments combined between a mother and daughter, and Shit Adults Never Told Us kind of reveals maybe some things that we don't know and we can learn from. So much wisdom. I'm still blown away. Like, how does she have so much wisdom at the age of 30? So subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on any of the podcast platforms that you listen to. And then you can join the conversation that we're going to continue to have about this on our Instagram and Facebook page. But for now, settle, reflect on what is your decided heart experience? What are you going to take action on? Please be inspired and have the courage to live with a decided heart. Thanks, everybody.